who's a world-class person, it's not an easy situation, as LeBron James, I believe, just airballed the free throw.
We are beginning to see a pivotal point in LeBron James's career where he is about to enter a pretty steep statistic decline for a very good reason. So what's going on, guys? Your boy Mike here, and before we get to the content, I just wanted to let you guys know we're giving away a PlayStation 5 to a subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel. Whether you're an old subscriber or a new subscriber, if you subscribed and hit that bell, you have entered for a chance to win a PS5. If you want an additional entry, make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And I also wanted to take an opportunity to shout out our latest supporters on YouTube and our membership program. Shout out to Isaiah Torres, Parnell St. Preux, Zach LaCourse, Nikolai Strickland, Boves Bushcraft, James Stewart, and a huge shout out to my man Richard for upgrading to a Mike Mafia Underboss. I really appreciate all you guys supporting me, because what you guys do really goes a long way in allowing me to do this full time as a profession. Now that we got all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I understand that there's going to be an overwhelming majority of you guys that are going to tell me, Mike, it's only been 3 games. How could you make such a video? Well, when you're an NBA YouTuber that uploads as consistently as I do, you tend to be able to nitpick at minor details that you feel like your audience would be interested in. And this isn't meant to be a negative video at all. It's more of an observation, if anything, because I, for one, am a huge Los Angeles Lakers fan. And when LeBron James joined the Los Angeles Lakers, I therefore became a LeBron James fan. Because the Los Angeles Lakers have been in this situation before, where they've had a prolific NBA superstar on their roster who is teaming up with a younger NBA superstar and is making sure that they have the supporting cast that is necessary to prolong his career as much as possible. I'm, of course, talking about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the NBA's top leading scorer, scoring the most points in NBA history and having a scoring title that LeBron James is clearly vying for. He's played in the NBA for 20 seasons, including 14 seasons with the Los Angeles Lakers. But at a specific point, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar went from being a player that the Los Angeles Lakers, well, at the time the Showtime Lakers, ran their offense through, to a player that the Lakers wanted to ensure that they preserved for as much as they possibly could. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's statistics throughout the latter part of his career and compared his 16th season in the NBA to his 17th season in the NBA, you'd notice something very fascinating. That was the point in which Kareem Abdul-Jabbar went from averaging 23 points per game off of 56% shooting to 17.5 points per game the year after off of the exact same field goal percentage. The only difference is he didn't really attempt as many field goals. And that's when the Los Angeles Lakers started to focus more on the preservation of the captain's career as opposed to running their offense through them. Because obviously having Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on your team in of itself is more than enough to motivate other players on the roster. Having him as a locker room presence is exactly what you need in order to make sure that your team will be able to win championships year in and year out. And this was obvious because the Showtime Lakers didn't win another championship the moment that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar retired. They made it to the conference semifinals the year after. They made it to the NBA Finals to meet Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls, but they were never successful in winning again. Well, the same thing is kind of happening here to the Lakers, only in a very different way. You see, LeBron James so far is averaging 21 points per game, but it's mainly because he's placed on this gigantic minutes restriction. As opposed to averaging his usual 35 to 37 minutes per game, he started out the season averaging 29 minutes per game, which is really important. Jimmy High Roller made a remarkable video that documented the correlation between NBA championship teams and the lack of rest that they got in comparison to the rest of the league, and how much more susceptible they were to sustaining an injury. If you need an example, look no further than the Golden State Warriors of the past decade. After making it to 5 straight NBA Finals, you saw both Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson sustaining very freak injuries. Kevin Durant with an Achilles tear and Klay Thompson with an ACL tear. By the time Klay Thompson came back and was ready for the season, well, he tore his Achilles as well. And clearly the Los Angeles Lakers paid very close attention to this, with both LeBron James and I guess you could say Anthony Davis to a lesser degree. He's only played in 2 games so far this season and has been averaging 30 minutes per game. But it doesn't stop there, because the way they built their team this offseason around LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and even going all the way back to a year ago, was a result of this philosophy of trying to make sure that they could prolong LeBron James's prime for as long as they possibly could. I think a lot of this has to do with the 2019 offseason that had Kawhi Leonard making a decision between the Los Angeles Clippers and the Los Angeles Lakers, because I felt like if he did want to come and join the Los Angeles Lakers, then the Lakers would be significantly more top heavy and you wouldn't see them featuring a bench that is nearly as deep. But since Kawhi Leonard joined the Los Angeles Clippers, and then the Los Angeles Lakers had to opt for players like Danny Green and Avery Bradley and Rajon Rondo the year prior, and as a result winning a championship with that core, then it became very clear to everyone in the NBA and the Los Angeles Lakers organization that they only needed Anthony Davis and LeBron James, and they should invest that capital and that salary cap elsewhere to make sure they could do whatever it takes to keep these 2 players as comfortable as possible, which means they invested heavily in the depth of their team as opposed to making their team even more top heavy. And the pinnacle of this philosophy came this past offseason, where the Los Angeles Lakers pounced on tremendous opportunities to improve their team. The very first move that they made was trading Danny Green for Dennis Schroeder, which in my opinion was an absolute no-brainer. Dennis Schroeder is, in my opinion, pretty much what Rajon Rondo was, only not nearly as prolific of a playmaking ability, but a definite increase in his scoring ability. And that's not a knock at Rajon Rondo, it's just they have 2 separate games. As a matter of fact, I feel like the way the Lakers are currently using Dennis Schroeder is completely incorrect, and he's probably going to be way better suited for coming off of the bench, because when you see him and LeBron James on the court together, they currently share the playmaking duties kind of the same way James Harden and Chris Paul did when they were together in Houston, and I don't know if they're going to continue doing that moving forward, because it kind of makes more sense to me to have Dennis Schroeder come off of the bench and captain that second unit and create plays for that second unit, as opposed to sharing responsibilities with LeBron James with the first unit. You saw them reward members of their championship core, pieces like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Kyle Kuzma, with very similar contract extensions. The Lakers didn't finish wheeling and dealing once they traded Danny Green for Dennis Schroeder. They replaced Danny Green's production with a player that costs literally a fifth of the price. Wesley Matthews averaged the same amount of 3-point attempts and the same exact 3-point percentage as Danny Green last year, and he doesn't cost $15 million a year. That in and of itself is a huge win. On top of that, the Lakers brought in the reigning 6th man of the year, and they signed Marc Gasol, while also letting Dwight Howard walk, which sucks because it kind of means that the only lob threat that the Lakers have is Anthony Davis. But if you ask me to choose between a big man that could stretch the floor and a big man that could catch lobs, more often than not, I'm going to pick the man that could stretch the floor and create more space in the paint for LeBron James to do his thing. LeBron James has never had a team like this before. The only thing that comes close to this type of team that he had were his Miami Heat teams that featured a past his prime Mike Miller, Rashard Lewis, and a player that was still contributing fairly well in Shane Battier. Yeah, he had Ray Allen as well a year before he decided to retire, but that's the closest team that comes to being able to compete with these role players that LeBron James currently has. And all of those players were extremely close to retirement after joining LeBron James's team. Ray Allen retired like 2 years later. Rashard Lewis barely saw any playing time for that Miami Heat roster. Shane Battier retired 2 years later. You get the point. This year's Los Angeles Lakers is quite possibly the greatest team I think LeBron James has ever been a part of. Not in terms of the overall talent, because the Miami Heat that feature Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh are absolutely terrifying because all three of those players were in their primes. The Cleveland Cavaliers that featured Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving are absolutely terrifying as well. The combination of Anthony Davis and LeBron James scratching that third superstar away and investing that capital into bench depth is exactly what LeBron James needs if he wants to make it to at least age 40 in the NBA. So yeah, be prepared because I am expecting LeBron James to take a step back in scoring moving forward and to mainly focus his attention and energy on creating plays for his teammates while still remaining as a terrifying finishing threat at the rim. This isn't a slight at LeBron James. This is more of a compliment to both LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers organization doing what needs to be done to keep the king on the court for as long as possible.